Any questions? If not, it's not. I mean, it's not really a question per se, but I think it's interesting because the whole session was about testing, and you know, you could see validation or contract as a way of testing things. In fact, I guess you can probably in Q or in nickel and code test as a validation step or as a schema. But yeah, I wonder if there is any difference, and if yes, what it is. I guess the approach that we try to take with contract is that it's built in the interpreter, so it's better equipped to track the probabilistic values. So if you if you build a contract from array and record constructors that is able to say, oh, this is a value that is offending. But on the other hand, I don't think it's really nice for whole configuration testing. I mean, you can always slap a type at the top level of the configuration, but then just a test. And so it's not really a question, but I wonder what are the differences and which one is more adapted to.
I don't think we'll get rid of unit testing in our GCL or BCL. We're still going to have it. Like you saw that we have multiple imports, and every import is basically it's a library. And people are using some stuff from this library to achieve some results. And when you know, and you can isolate an abstraction, you can test it without the intent. It should work, you know when and how it should work in certain cases. You can write a unit test suite for this particular library and cover it with tests. But for leaf configuration, when we actually doing actuation of the service on board, we don't know the intent without actually some hints from the developers. We can probably use some heuristics in some cases, but not always, and I think it's rarely the case.
Okay.
Hi, yeah, I think this talk is actually tackling a very similar problem that my talk, as you started. I was wondering, like, our core idea to solve the problem of testing being too much effort for individual projects is pushing it as much as possible to the community to leverage reuse and having low effort to no effort for the individual project. You right now go the other way around. Like you say, we want to do it for everyone, but we need their input. But what is your experience like? Or how hard is it in practice to get this information then?
It's hard.
And do you have any ideas how we
Not yet.
can get through that? Because, I mean, having these mechanisms is definitely very important and certainly necessary up to a certain level. But if nobody uses them, then we really have a problem, right?
We do have some ideas how we want to basically evangelize these things, mostly through policies. I think policies will be our entry point in how to promote these things. Back to your presentation, we don't see very any intentless validations. In very few cases you can actually say whether this particular case is fully invalid. And in very many cases, because we own the entire stack, we can embed these validations into the control tool itself. So the control tool can prevent things from happening outright. We are pretty safe there. Most of the validations we are expecting to see, they will be intent-based. You have to know what users actually want to see.
Actually, I'm wondering a lot about this statement. For a certain reason. I mean, especially in public clouds, perhaps this situation doesn't fully apply to Google internally. But in public clouds, it's very easy to configure your network, for example, in a way that your system works perfectly, but not only you and your system have access to your database, but the rest of the world as well. And there's tons of best practices for AWS, Google Cloud, whatnot configuration that is just best practices that can be codified, that just look, well, do you really not have your subnet public on the web? Do you really not have only HTTP accesses between your servers? Do you really not have a passwordless database hanging around? Yeah?
No.
And these general things seem to be pretty effective and needed in practice, up to the fact that that Pulumi makes a product of it, of having just these policies codified.
I agree, but we don't have a public API.
Okay, so it's not a Google problem.
As I said, a lot of the things which you need to fight with, we don't have, because we have an internal control tool which is capable of making things safer for us. And all the stuff all the cherry picking is done. So we have to deal with other problems now.
Hi. Just for clarification, these validators, are they operating on the abstract syntax trees of the configuration files?
No, they work on top of the data.
On top of the data,
Yeah.
okay. And do they ever get access to the actual configurations themselves? I mean, the runtimes? Or?
We try not to do this. Yeah. There is a backdoor, but we are encourage people not to do this.
So it's more linting.
Yeah. Well, it's actually opposite. The linting has access to configuration, the source files, and our validators, they don't. They work on top of the data, which will represent the service on board.
You're hallucinating questions. I might have another question for Daniel. I'm not sure if you covered that, but yeah, you say that the type are quite coarse. For example, if you have a string in your API, but actually what you should get back in practice is a URL. Do you have, or do you plan to have a way to parameterize that? So, for example, for the user to provide a generator for more specific types, typically URL as a...
So yes, I think this is a very common problem, because so the types that we have, for example, from these Pulumi types are the JSON data types that you have. Yeah, and I mean, you can't even say this is a port that should be an integer from 0 to 65,000. And I mean, there's two levels to tackle this problem. One is on a systematic level for everyone, and that would be having more precise models actually, and being able to encode this for the entire cloud. And that would be idiomatic, because then everyone gets it for free. And actually, Jürgen has a student that is pretty much looking into that right now. That would be the idiomatic solution, but also pretty hard, because getting these more precise types into the technology, and then also someone just implementing or defining that model for entire AWS, Google Cloud, is a lot of work. For individual projects, we have a mechanism, and that was these inline specifications, which I very briefly skimmed. So if you have a specific point where you want to make sure this is indeed a port number and not just a number, then you can add a small accept this value to be, and then you can implement a predicate. And then this check will be ignored during normal deployment. But if you run it with Proti, we will check every concrete value that we get for this predicate. So we have a mechanism which is arguably a lot of effort if you want to do it for every value in your individual program. So it's not idiomatic, but you can do it. And it's not too much coding, but it is some effort. And the more conceptual solution, hopefully, we see in the next 5 years.
By the way, if I may add, like one of the ways how we can introduce intent into your system as well in your validations, you can let your users to configure your oracles. You can let the developers to pass information into oracles to basically tell how oracles should do the validation. So in this particular scenario, you will have pretty much the same story as we have. Like we are capable of supporting both intent and intent-less validations, and like you can expand into intent validations as well.
And
actually, this is just a terminology.
It's more efficient, yeah.
So it's just a terminology question. This distinction between intent-less and intent-full, I find that very nice. Is that terminology you came up with, or is that already established? Okay. So let's make it established for now.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay.
I agree.
I really like it. Okay.
And concerning like what you said about schema, I don't remember if it's Terraform or something else, but we try to auto-generate like nickel contract from stuff like JSON schema or whatever, and it's often very sad because the JSON schema is very basic. I mean, I think it's more or less the TypeScript types, but usually in the description you have an almost machine-readable additional information. So I don't remember which system it was, but you had like this must be a natural number or a list that is of length something. And it was, you could almost transform it so that the information is there, but yeah, just that the model is not powerful enough to express it. So that's yeah, exactly for LLM. Yeah, okay.
One comment I'd like to make after watching Alex's presentation is both the configuration diffing solution that we presented and Alex's testing framework interface with the developer at the data level. We present the data output, the tests run on that data output as well. And I think one of the reasons, as someone asked about why are solutions not being utilized as much as we'd like, is potentially because of that gap between domain experts and the developers. Maybe that data model works and makes sense to those domain experts. And over time, we'll probably have to find a way to make that also be more meaningful to developers.
And it reminds me, so it's a bit different because it's not about testing, but I think the idea behind, but probably Q as well, and something in Nix that is called NixOS modules. So what you use to describe the configuration of your system is exactly the same idea in that as a user, you don't want to understand how to generate this /etc config file, but you just toggle high level, I want to enable SSH, I want to enable this complex service. And then the people writing the actual modules are domain experts that know how to derive this thing from the high-level knobs. But yeah, I guess the idea is that users don't have to interact with this part of the system ideally and just stay in the high-level configuration.
One more comment. So one of the applications of config diffing that we didn't present is for large-scale changes. Now, if a developer is making a change to source code and they're already describing their intent, but when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of files, the person who's making that larger change can potentially describe their change in a different abstract language. What would you call that? Like start block. Just I intend for this value to change to that value. And if I can describe that intent, sorry.
Providing a domain-specific language to describe the change in the output.
Right. So if the person making the large change wants to describe their intent and what their expected output is, our tool can also be used to automatically reject changes that don't fit that mold if they're doing something unexpected. You can speak to this.
Yeah, I mean, very close to that. I mean, one concept that we get in the kind of technology we look at is also that you can build actually higher level configuration abstractions by reusing OOP mechanisms that we have in these languages, right? So we can implement our own component resource class, which in the constructor then defines other resources. But with everything OOP, and I mean, Marcel has very strong opinions on that composition over inheritance. This is also makes it very easy to obfuscate things. But this is actually something that people use. BMW, for example, I talked with people there last week that use that very heavily. They have an internal platform team that basically builds the abstractions BMW developers actually care about on a very high level, and provide them as a shared library. And that seems to work very well because it hides a lot of the configuration details from these developers without obfuscating them.
Mileage may vary.
Question for you. So Alex presented some of his validators. Do you have any examples of policies that you've seen implemented?
Yeah. So I mean,
are they similar to what Alex presented?
I would say they're more general. It's really things like your AWS 3 bucket. Does it have the switch "I'm public on the web"? Is it off? Yeah. If you define a CIDR, is it not on 000, but is it more specific? If you define a subnet, do you attach access control policy to lock it down, basically? Yeah, so it's really on this very general level. However, this seems to be needed in many cases because people forget it.
Yes.
Or just don't know about it. I mean, that's even worse. Like, the cloud is very easy to use for everyone, and still it's very complex. And the documentation is also, I would say, in general, incomplete and not very accessible. So it needs a lot of experience to use the cloud safely, but everyone can use it. So having these as a safety net is just a generally good thing. Yeah.
We got a question back.
So the first presenters of this session presented a diffing tool, so to speak, and the last presenter presented a validator tool. And I was wondering, has there ever been a need to validate the changes and the consistency of changes? Because that seems like would be a nice collaboration between the two teams.
Yes.
Okay.
They're all actually friends.
Okay.
I'd like to comment, and Vikram, you should chime in. One of the things we're trying to do is, Vikram's team also has invented a set of additional debugging symbols that are appended to the output, which can also, like what a debugger would do is to tie it back to the source, where the output came from. And using that, they're able to build additional analyzers, and if Vikram can give an example of that. One of the ones that might.
I'm trying to see how to translate it into
On top of this,
on top of it,
not every question we can answer, unfortunately.
to some public. But yeah, as I was saying, actually, one of our strategies to improve our 21% number is to have analyzers run on the diff output. Right, so that we can do automatic basic checks based on the domain, saying this sort of transition is actually not allowed. And for transition checks, we need both the older value and the newer value, unlike regular unit tests where you just have the new value. Right, so yeah, we are definitely looking into something like that. Yeah.
I think it's almost there. I'm very interested in having, so we had a lot of examples of things that crashed because of configurations. I had a part of the list, but not all of the list, so I would be very interested in gathering those examples because, that make for nice paper intros. But we can do that at the end. So yeah, it's time to wrap up. It was really nice to be for the first time in person. I want to thank Jürgen, Marcel, and Mark as well. Yeah. And me for organizing, and this young person as well who put up with our strange domain. Yeah, I think we wondered if we are very interested in continuing this workshop or this meeting, whatever the form. But we wondered if, every year, what a good, was too short or not, or every 2 years would be a better frequency, and we were interested in getting your input on that. Would you come back next year if we were to do exactly the same thing, or would you have not enough things to to show?
1 year sounds okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are two options that I had in mind, and we can talk about it, obviously. So OOPSLA next year would be in Los Angeles, which interesting, but a bit far from all the organizers, at least. There's eCube and ISTA in Vienna next year, which would be nice for me. Is that an option at all? Do people want to come to Vienna next year? September? Yes, I see some nodding. All right. I think that's something we can talk about. If you want to help out as part of organizing or program committee, please let us know. Talk to us. There's one more thing I wanted to ask. Is there anything else? Yeah, Marcel.
So related to this, I think what I've heard from Marcus also, there's also interest to really start establishing more of a configuration field within academics in general, like starting lifting it. So basically continuing the whole Dagstuhl story and sort of building on that and expanding that. That would be nice, just as a.
Yeah. So there. So their Dagstuhl is a high overhead option. Like getting this stuff into Dagstuhl was like this whole process. Yeah. There's another one that I think is interesting because it's in Japan, which is called Shonen. The academics here will know it. And another one that is a bit more lightweight is in the Netherlands. It's No. It's a format like Dagstuhl. It's in Leiden, and I forgot the name right now. Does anyone? It's some center. It's the Leibniz Center, maybe? Yeah. So there's some more lightweight form of organizing these kinds of things in the Netherlands, I think, that would be interesting. So that we can pursue that potentially. Yeah. And CONFLANG can continue as you know, as a one-day thing. The other option is to have 3 or 5 days. Yeah. And you know, it was really good at Dagstuhl. Yeah. That's maybe something we can do every 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Is there anything else we want to bring up?
And then how to also think about how to then move that further, right?
Yeah, I guess a mailing list should be in place at some point. Like we have the Dagstuhl mailing list, but if you want to expand to this audience here too, maybe we can have like a Google group or something. I think that could be interesting.
That's going to be nice. Yeah. I really want to see the fundamental research on what is the difference between code config and data.
I think it will be an opinion piece more than the fundamental.
You need to start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Then maybe I have one more ask, because this is the first in-person CONFLANG. We had, like the predecessor to CONFLANG was called SE Config, Software Engineering for Configuration at ASE, and we had a very nice group picture. So everyone who wants to join, I would love to have a picture here in front of the TV maybe. Yeah.